Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 is divided into 2 arcs. The first of which is the Hidden Inventory arc, which is a sort of prequel series that expands on the implied relationship between Gojo and Geto, and the show actually takes the time to explore these characters and their classmates and their relationships with each other, as well as showing how, more specifically than anyone else, Gojo and Geto get to the point where they are in the mainline story. It also opens with a very charming scene of Mei and Urahime, which is probably one of my favorite parts in the entire series. They also have Gojo's Infinity not active the entire time, 24/7, which allows for the main antagonist of this arc, Toji, to become an actual credible threat, to the point where he's even a threat going on into the sequel arc to this. JJK has a terrible time actually exploring its characters, to the point where we get about 5 episodes exploring Gojo and Geto and a bit of their classmates with this arc, and then almost immediately after this arc, we get maybe 1 episode exploring Itadori. Like, there have realistically been more time paid to Gojo and Geto as characters from this singular arc alone than there have been for any of the main cast going forward. And so this entire arc ends up with a sort of more light-hearted vibe to it until it gets really dark and heavy towards the end when Toji starts going on his fucking killing rampage. Easily my favorite arc of the entire series. Very good. Honestly, I kind of wish JJK was just about Gojo Geto's school days, because I also like their classmates and what they did with their classmates in this, and I wish the entire show was more like Hidden Inventory. This follows up into, I want to call it the Shibuya incident, where all of the main antagonists get together on this planet to seal Gojo. And I think that the crux of this idea is actually a pretty solid one. The fact is, Gojo, as I said in Season 1, is a problem that should never have been made. And I have heard that the creator actually hates him as a character, and I fully understand why. He's likable, but he's too powerful to be in this series. Or more specifically, the ability Infinity is too powerful to be in this series. This is a show where the main character's main ability is punch, and the main villain's main ability is cut. And Gojo rocks up with the ability to cause infinite deceleration of any incoming attacks. There are settings and universes where Gojo's ability could be managed, but JJK does not have a high enough power ceiling to support Infinity as an ability. He would be fine without Infinity. He would probably still be one of, if not the strongest dude in the series outside of like a full power of Sukuna without Infinity, but with Infinity, he is absolutely fucking busted. So the idea of having all of the villains come together to seal him off, presumably so that he is taken out of the story until one could assume a full power Sukuna shows up and probably kills him, as was implied in the opening of Season 1, just so they don't have to deal with how fucking batshit overpowered they accidentally made him. The fact that they have to come together to do this does pay respects to how powerful Gojo is as a character. So they managed to let him maintain his character's integrity while also simultaneously writing him out of the fucking show, which they definitely had to if any progress was going to be made on the plot ever. The opening parts of the Shibuya arc, I think, are very well done, very interesting. I loved watching Gojo fight all of the curses. And it also brings in this sort of narrator, which I get a lot of Chimera Ant arc vibes from. And in fact, I wouldn't be shocked if that was where the inspiration came from, who helps explain how the characters are doing things and what specifically they're doing in individual scenes. I actually did enjoy the narrator. I think he did add to the show, and I was very much on board with that. Outside of the opening, though, with Gojo fighting the curses, once we get into the sealed territory, there are a lot of fights in the Shibuya arc of varying quality. Also, I skipped over the opening Mechamaru fight because genuinely, who the fuck cares about Mechamaru? I would probably say I enjoyed half of these fights, and I think we'll probably get into more detail about that later, but I would definitely like to give full credit to, obviously, Gojo versus the curses at the beginning, but I did enjoy also Sukuna versus Jogo and Yuji versus his fucking blood-shooting brother man. I don't fucking remember his name at all. Oh, also, Nobara versus Mahito and Todo versus Mahito. I think those were pretty good fights at all. Also, I'm glad I mentioned Todo because his fucking pull-up, like, I didn't really like Todo in season 1. I've become a Todo fan now, all right? Todo's pretty fucking cool. Todo might be my favorite character, which is why I'm also glad that I mentioned Todo, Mahito, and Nobara, because that brings us to what isn't necessarily an issue with this season, but is almost certainly going to be an issue coming forward, which is that the Shibuya incident had an absolutely outrageous kill streak. I would probably say roughly half the cast between the heroes and the villains have been taken out of the story, or at least of the next arc. Not all of them are dead. Some of them have just lost their ability to use their curse techniques. Some of them are sealed, like a Gojo or Sukuna, and some of them are only mostly dead. But the point is, at least half the cast across both sides have been taken out for the next arc. And as I said in the opening of this review, JJK absolutely refuses to explore any of its goddamn characters. And the ones that this specific season actually bothered to explore, of those characters, all of those characters have been taken out also. So there is, except for Mei Mei, so there is basically no one left that the show has ever decided to put any fucking attention into that will be remaining for the next arc. There's like Yuji and Megumi and Yuta and Panda, I guess, but genuinely, who the fuck cares about Panda? So I will say that the writing all of the characters out that the season did definitely makes it a way to keep you guessing what is happening throughout the course of the season. But I am also very much skeptical about where the show can go from here, because every time you take a character out of the narrative, and it's worth noting, especially in like the case of Todo, who isn't dead, but he can't use his curse technique, and in a shonen battle series, that's like being dead because he can't affect the narrative anymore. When you write characters out of the narrative like this, every time you're rolling the dice on taking out someone's favorite character. And when you roll the dice on half your fucking cast, there is a good chance that a lot of people are going to drop off because you took out every character they liked. Now, I will say that I never really found much of the JJK cast that strong, and so I'm still on board for the show, but it is worth noting that going forward, it would take a very skilled writer to recover from the amount of damage they've done to it, because every time you take a character out, you are effectively taking out potential story beats, and it would take a skilled writer to write around taking out half of your potential storylines. And again, this is the person that thought that Gojo was a good idea at some point, so I don't have any faith in the writing capabilities. Regardless, my number one issue with probably why I didn't vibe too much with the show is there's just so much fucking fighting, it just kind of gets boring. I think certain scenes are handled very well, but when you couple it with the fact that there's a sort of lackluster cast outside of like the first 5 episodes, in general, it is just a prevalent JJK issue, and then you couple that with the fact that there's a lot of boring fight scenes with characters that I have no reason to give a shit with, I found myself tuning out more often than not. Now, that is the bulk of the review, but let's get into the elephant in the room. If you just wanted the main story complaints I have with it, you're good to go. Let's talk about the animation. What I want to say about this is that the show itself is animated fantastically, and I want to give full credit to the animators. They did their job to perfection. I have nothing bad to say about them. I will say that I think the show is, especially in a lot of fight scenes, especially when the characters have more crazy power sets, over-animated. I think there's too much detail. I think there's too much motion. And at one point during the Dagon fight, for example, I decided to count how much time it decides to hang on single shots, and it will change shots once every 1 to 3 seconds. Occasionally it gets to 4 or 5, but it's usually every 1 to 3 seconds. So what this does is it gives this sort of illusion of the fights moving at a very rapid paces, but when you move at that sort of speed, you also take out all of the impact of the blows, right? So if the show is more willing to linger on these impacts, things would feel like they're hitting harder. But there are multiple instances where you see characters' arms going in blurs of motion, and the enemy's just spitting out blood, and you don't get anything from that. There's no lingering, there's no gravitas, and then the enemy is basically as damaged as they were before they got punched 6,000 times. Like, Yuji has dealt more damage with you doing a fucking delayed punch than he did punching Mahito in the face like 6,000 times. One hit from Nobara did more damage than 12,000 Yuji punches to Mahito. That is how much of a problem this is. It's also just sort of distracting, especially the Mechamaru fight where there's just fucking lights going crazy crazy. There's one shot that's on screen for like 6 fucking seconds where you see sweat drops flying off of Yuji and Mahito's face. There's no reason for those to be there. It just distracts from the scene. So it has these issues where there's just like blurs of motion with the fights having no impact whatsoever. And you have these issues where it's just changing shots so fucking quickly. It's so rapid. It's hard to keep track of what's fucking happening. At one point when Sukuna's fighting Maharaga, a fucking plane falls out of the sky, and I rewatched the scene a bunch of times. I've yet to figure out what hits the fucking plane. Planes fly so fucking high into the sky that the only reason that plane could fucking be there is because they wanted to have a fucking plane fall out of the sky in the middle of the fight. It is so fucking stupid. And I actually genuinely think there is so much animation in a lot of these fights that it ends up looking like shit. Now, again, I want to be very clear. I think the animators did a fantastic job at animating the scenes and drawing it. They're very clearly skilled. They're very clearly talented. What this comes down to is a directorial issue. I think the director is fucking up here. I do not think there needs to be this amount of animation in these fucking fight scenes. And I think the show looks worse because it refuses to actually dwell on any specific moment during these scenes. Furthermore, we have to talk about the controversy about how fucking hard MAPPA is pushing their animators. They had to issue an apology over this fucking season of this show because of how hard they were pushing their animators. I have never heard of a studio ever doing that. Maybe it's happened before, maybe Gainax in like the 90s or some shit, but like, holy shit, I've never heard of it. That's how fucking hard they were going with this. And what's worse is I think the end product looks bad because of it. Because what this basically is they get a bunch of skilled and talented animators, and then they make them draw a bunch of random, like, fucking bullshit, unnecessary frames. Keep in mind, every time they change shots in the middle of a fight, that's some animator having to spend 2 to 3 fucking hours drawing the goddamn shots, not including all of the other individual frames they have to draw in between that. So they're making more work for these poor animators for a worse result. And I would probably liken this to like giving a Formula 1 car to an amateur driver. Like, they have all of the talent in the world, but the director is, 1, making them work way fucking harder than they have to, and 2, creating a worse product because of it. There is no justifiable reason these animators should have to be making scenes like this, especially because I don't think the end product is worth it. And were it to be worth it, let's remind ourselves that Jujutsu Kaisen runs in fucking weekly Shonen Jump. This is an anime that at the end of the day is made for children, and it is certainly not well enough crafted that it deserves the kind of attention it is being given in this. So again, reiterate, animation director sucks ass. The animators themselves, fucking fantastic. Zero complaints. I hope they get a fucking nap at some point, right? Because this is absolutely a travesty what happened to them. Regardless, everyone knows I'm very much separating the art from the artist, and so, despite practically using slave labor, that actually had no impact on my opinions on the actual course of the season. It really is I just did not enjoy the vast majority of it. I think the final episode was fantastic and really got me excited for the next arc, although, again, I am very much skeptical that they can make anything even remotely palatable with the fact that they killed off half the cast. And I also think Hidden Inventory was really good, but I did think that the majority of this fucking season was just a lot of like boring fight scenes with characters that, again, we still have zero reason to give a single shit about. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye bye.